48 hours. That was the brief period the West granted a widow before swallowing her entire home.
Silver Wash, Utah Territory, fall 1883. The frost arrived earlier than usual, but the real biting cold came from the notice nailed to the wooden post outside the Reed Wash Ranch gate. Silver vein mining boundary, relocation required. Just 10 words, enough to turn the land her husband had shed blood to cultivate for 10 years into someone else's property. Bryce Rusk, the foreman with the cold eyes of Dalton Vane, reined in his horse and looked down. He didn't use a gun. Here, guns were cheap. The real enemy used the law, used tampered survey maps to steal a person's livelihood, water, and honor. Sarah Reed didn't scream. She didn't beg. 4 long years of single-handedly pulling calves out of the mud and repairing fences in the blizzard had worn away all her weaknesses. She calmly folded the notice. Turning into the log cabin, she locked the door and flipped up the floorboards hidden under the dining table. Inside the cold iron box were the red-stamped land deeds, an old boundary map, and crumpled tax receipts. But Bryce Rusk left a sharp whisper before turning and riding away. The papers will only save you if you live to take them out of this valley. Some people come to Silver Wash for silver. Some come seeking a second chance. And some just want to sneak through the darkness unnoticed. Matt Hale wasn't a hero. His conscience had been buried years ago when he chose to turn a blind eye, allowing a family to lose their land because of his cowardly silence. Today, he walked into the town's tavern just to buy 2 boxes of ammunition and some bandages for the bleeding bullet wound on his left shoulder. But then, his steps faltered before the wanted poster plastered on the wall. The ink was still wet. $3,000 for Matt Hale, dead or alive. Charge: theft of silver vein mine documents. $3,000, a price high enough to buy the soul of every man in this impoverished town. Matt didn't steal money. He only took the single ledger that proved Dalton Vane's lies. He slipped out of the pub, disappearing into a secluded corner of the foggy street, where the enormous black horse named Shadow was waiting. And that's when he saw her. Sarah Reed stood in the middle of the main street, bracing herself to protect the leather bag clutched to her chest from 3 of the mine's henchmen. She didn't need anyone to rescue her. Her deep, unwavering black eyes pierced straight into Matt's past wounds. Sarah turned around. She saw the blood stain on his shoulder. She saw the wanted poster blown by the wind against her heel. Instead of running, the widow, carrying the land deed, walked straight toward the man the entire town was hunting. $3,000. Her voice was cold, blending with the howling wind. So you're the man Dalton Vane is so afraid of that he's put a bounty on your head. A woman needs time to process the truth. An outlaw needs to pay the price to redeem his honor. There was no trust between them, but the 48-hour deadline was ticking. A man with a $3,000 bounty on his head wasn't the kind of ally a widow wanted to keep by her side while trying to protect her farm. Sarah turned her back. She knew his presence now would only draw Dalton Vane's guns to Reed Wash. But Matt didn't leave. Beneath his blood-stained coat, he pulled out a leather-bound ledger. The only evidence showing the mine boundaries had been altered after her husband's death. He had the ledger. She had the deeds and tax receipts. 2 pieces of a truth buried beneath the silver dust of Silver Wash. All the major roads to Parowan County Courthouse are blocked by Vane's men, Matt said in a low, hoarse voice. The only way out is through Silver Wash Cut, a narrow gorge barely wide enough for a single carriage. He offered to go with her. But the West had taught Sarah a bitter lesson. Never entrust your life and land to another man. She refused. She had lived under Dalton Vane's oppressive shadow for the past 3 years, and she knew exactly what kind of devils she was up against. Sarah carefully tucked all the papers into a small leather pouch, then tied it tightly around her chest, close to her heartbeat. "Why not put it in the saddlebag?" Matt asked, frowning. "Because." Sarah tightened the leather strap, her gaze unwavering. "If the horse falls, these papers will still go with me." Dalton Vane never had to raise his voice. He didn't need swear words or loud gunfire in the middle of the street. When the silversmith stepped out of his upholstered carriage, his clean coat and polished leather shoes, the entire town of Silverwash fell into a deathly silence. Because Vane owned not just the silver mine, he owned the telegraph station, the stables, the freight lines, and even the tin badge of the sheriff who stood timidly on the porch. He stopped Sarah in front of the town post office. With a polite smile, he offered to forgive her debt for winter hay for her cattle in exchange for a signature on a transfer deed. "Leave with some money or stubbornly stay and lose everything, Mrs. Reed," Vane said softly, his voice as gentle as a velvet-covered blade. But Sarah only looked him straight in the eye, biting her lip, and walked past without uttering a word of compromise. Vane's gaze grew cold. He turned to Matt Hale, who was hiding in the shadows. He recognized the man who had once guided his mining convoys. He reminded him of the day Matt had chosen to remain silent, allowing a farming family to be driven from their land because of fake maps. "A coward can never become a hero overnight, Hale." Vane's words pierced the deepest wound in Matt's soul. "That's Dalton Vane. He doesn't just threaten with guns, he suffocates people with debt and uses their past to crush their honor." Watching the resolute figure of the widow Reed disappear down the street, Vane turned to the foreman, Bryce, and issued a cold command. "Stop that woman at all costs. If she gets those papers to the county court, not only will that farm survive, but this whole town will learn how to stand up against me." The $3,000 bounty not only lured the naive drunkards, but also awakened the most seasoned wolves of the West. Orrin Pike, a veteran bounty hunter who had spent more than half his life on horseback, had just arrived in Silverwash with 2 impulsive young gunmen. He had patiently tracked Matt Hale for days, but he didn't rush to draw his gun. A seasoned hunter always knows how to observe his prey before pulling the trigger. From a hidden corner, Orrin saw the bleeding wound on Matt's left shoulder. He saw the black horse Shadow standing vigilantly to protect its master. And most of all, he saw the way the widow Reed directed her gaze toward the wanted man. It wasn't a look of disgust for a criminal, but a look for a broken piece trying to mend a broken past. As darkness fell, Orrin cornered Matt in the town's stables. 2 young gunmen, their weapons gleaming, were eager to take lives. But Matt wouldn't let the bloodshed be in vain. With the agility of a ghost, he tossed aside the dry straw, using the darkness and the neighing of horses to slip into the night without taking anyone's life. However, during the struggle to escape, a yellowed page from the silver mine's ledger fell from his coat. Orrin Pike stepped forward, squinting as he picked up the page covered in horse mane dust. He scanned the illegible writing under the flickering lamplight. The old man's aged eyes widened. He realized this hunt wasn't simply about catching a thief. This was a systematic murder. This mining claim. The bounty hunter's voice lowered, whispering into the silent space. was altered after the husband's death. Night fell at Reed Wash Ranch. The desert wind howled through the limestone cliffs, carrying the bone-chilling cold of the borderland autumn, threatening to freeze everything. Inside the wooden house, the flickering firelight illuminated two figures. Sarah was diligently mending a leather document pouch with waxed thread, each stitch piercing the cowhide with the same determination as her own will. In the corner, Matt silently disassembled his pistol to clean it, but his left hand trembled slightly from the swollen bullet wound in his shoulder. Sarah said nothing. She quietly rose, placing a basin of hot water, a bottle of antiseptic, and a few clean cloths on the wooden table in front of him. There were no lengthy thank yous, no tearful glances or superfluous touches. Their bond blossomed from silent acts of care on the brink of life and death. Amidst the crackling of burning wood, secrets of the past were gradually revealed. Sarah recounted the day her husband perished in the collapse of the silver mine's side tunnel, and how Dalton Vane had so shamelessly altered the mining boundaries to steal the hard-earned land of her family. In response, Matt bowed his head, bitterly admitting his past cowardice. He had once been a guide, had seen the forged maps, but had chosen silence out of fear, resulting in another family losing their land. Sarah offered no words of comfort, nor did she forgive his past. She simply looked directly into his weary eyes, her voice firm. Then this time, please don't be silent. They agreed on a plan, a gamble with their lives. Tomorrow morning at dawn, Matt would escort her to the mouth of Silver Wash Cut. Then he would return to town as bait, exposing himself to Vane's firepower, fighting for every minute she had to take the paperwork to Parowan County Court alone. As the fire died down, Sarah stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the thick darkness. What if I return and you're no longer here? Matt's figure faded into the shadows, only his deep, warm voice echoing amidst the howling wind. Then return, with a farm still standing. The dawn breaking over the Iron Mountains brought no warm rays of sunshine, only the grayness of a storm poised to engulf the land. Sarah rode ahead, her leather pouch containing vital evidence strapped to her chest. Beside her, Matt Hale rode shadow, as steadfast as a fortress wall. They entered Silver Wash Cut, a narrow, deep limestone gorge that had once been the vital cattle route for Reed Wash Farm. Now, it lurked like a giant trap. The biting cold cut into their skin. Each breath turned into white smoke. Sharp rocks on either side of the cliffs threatened to break the legs of any horse that stumbled, and the echoing sounds made it impossible to guess how far away the enemy was. Suddenly, Sarah reined in her horse, her gaze fixed on the deep furrows dug in the road. The tracks of heavily loaded carts were still fresh. The dust of ore still clung to the ground. Dalton Vane had begun transporting ore through the canyon even without a legal ruling. He was cunning and ruthless. He was trying to create a reality to force the entire town to believe that this land truly belonged to the silver mine. The moment of parting had arrived. There were no awkward hugs or tears of farewell. Sarah looked at Matt. She didn't try to stop him, for she understood that his sacrifice was so she could continue. Returning to town as bait to face Vane's gun was his atonement, while taking this note to Parowan was her battle. But just as Matt pulled the reins and turned the horse, Shadow suddenly stopped, its ears perked up and tense. From the sheer cliff above, a small stone clattered to the ground. Someone was watching them. From behind a large rock obscuring their view, a figure slowly emerged. The bounty hunter, Orrin Pike. But he wasn't brandishing his usual revolver. He had been following them since midnight. He could have pulled the trigger and easily taken Matt's head for $3,000. But he hadn't. Orrin Pike pulled a crumpled, yellowed piece of paper from his pocket, a piece that had fallen from Matt's ledger last night. "You're protecting something you don't even understand," his hoarse voice echoed through the silent canyon. "Dalton Vane doesn't need this canyon just to transport ore." The old man pointed toward the limestone vein running the length of the valley. The cruel truth was finally revealed by the numbers in the ledger. Beneath the mine boundary that Vane was trying to redraw lay a massive underground water channel that supplied life to the entire Reedwash area. He was planning to dig a secondary tunnel to drain this water source. He didn't just want to steal the land. He wanted to kill the farm from the roots, to make the cattle die of thirst, to force widows like Sarah to sell their barren land for dirt cheap. And worse news, a court clerk in Parowan had taken Vane's money. Sending the paperwork wasn't enough. Sarah was forced to go there herself, verify every stroke of the pen, every boundary marker, and sign the oath. The fight was now more than just about keeping a roof over her head. If Sarah failed, the entire valley would die of thirst under Dalton Vane's claws. The three of them stood frozen in the canyon, the weight of the truth pressing down on them. But just as silence fell, bang! A deafening gunshot ripped through the air. But it didn't come from behind or from the top of the canyon. It echoed from the south towards Sarah's farm. A thick column of black smoke billowed towards the southern horizon, cutting across the gray sky like a slash. It wasn't smoke from a kitchen chimney. It was Reedwash Ranch's winter hay storage engulfed in flames. Bryce Rusk had acted. He didn't need to chase Sarah into the treacherous canyon. He had set fire to the cattle's livelihood. A cruel trap set to force the widow to turn back. A rancher's instinct screamed in Sarah's chest. It was her home, her cattle, the harsh winter she had prepared with blood and sweat. She gripped the reins, intending to turn and charge into the inferno. But a strong hand gripped the reins. Matt Hale. "If you turn back, the flames will consume even the paper you're holding." Matt's eyes were heartbreakingly calm. "They don't need to put out the fire. They're just waiting for you to show up so they can snatch that bag." Matt knew exactly what he had to do. He would return to the farm, back to Vane's gun-strewn town, to hold Bryce off. And Orrin Pike, the old bounty hunter who had given up his $3,000, would escort Sarah along the shortcut to Parowan in his place. Sarah looked at Matt, her eyes filled with intense conflict. She didn't want to hand him over to a death that was almost certain. "You hold this land with papers," Matt whispered, slowly releasing his grip on the reins. "And I will hold time with what I have left." In the West, mature love isn't about blindly rushing towards each other to die together. Love is about steadfastly moving forward, about carrying on to the very end the ideal that the other person is risking their life to protect. Sarah whipped her horse. She left with Orrin, not as a weak woman rescued, but as a warrior who chose the most brutal price to pay to protect the truth. Watching Sarah's figure disappear behind the limestone cliff, Matt turned his horse towards the column of smoke. Shadow hesitated slightly, refusing to run faster, for a war horse that had faced death had smelled the pungent scent of blood waiting on the way back. When Matt Hale returned to Silverwash, the main street reeked of ash from Reedwash Farm. In front of the general store, Bryce Rusk was loudly lecturing the bewildered townspeople. He wove a perfect story. Widow Reed had deliberately set fire to the hayshed
to defraud the insurance company, then eloped with a wanted hitman.
The bribed sheriff stood silently in the corner, arms crossed. The stable master hung his head. The telegraph operator turned away. The entire town of Silverwash had turned a blind eye to the truth, their fear of Dalton Vane ingrained in their bones. Matt couldn't simply draw his gun. If he fired first, Dalton Vane would have the perfect excuse to make him a violent criminal, and Sarah a permanent accomplice. He chose to do something even harder than pulling the trigger. In the windy street, facing dozens of menacing guns, Matt opened his leather-bound ledger. He read aloud each line, each number, each altered date. He forced this cowardly town to hear the truth.
His past was one of silence, but today he would use his own life to atone for that mistake, to repay his debt of honor before dozens of people.
The truth, exposed, threw Bryce Rusk into a frenzy. He frantically drew his gun. Bang! The gunshot ripped through the air. But Matt was a beat faster. His bullet didn't pierce the foreman's heart. It lodged in Bryce's hand, sending the weapon flying to the ground. Matt didn't kill him. He needed Bryce alive to be a trembling witness before the court of conscience of the Silverwash community. A deathly silence fell over the street, until slow, steady applause erupted from the steps of the Silver Vane office. Dalton Vane emerged, his coat spotless. He smiled politely at Matt. "Thank you, Hale. Now the whole town has heard a fugitive confess that he was in possession of stolen Silver Vane documents." On the rough shortcut to Parowan, the cruelty of the West once again tested the widow's resilience. At a deserted, abandoned water station, the sound of gunfire ripped through the air. Orrin Pike, the seasoned bounty hunter, was hit by a bullet through his side and fell into a pool of reddish mud. Sarah's horse reared in panic. The leather pouch containing Reed Wash's life broke free and landed right at the edge of the murky water trough. Bullets churned up the ground. Sarah stood before a cruel line: abandon Orrin to save the contract, or drag him to safety and risk the precious evidence being swallowed by the mud. She didn't choose the paper. Sarah lunged forward, using the strength of a woman accustomed to wrestling with calves in a storm, dragging the hunter's heavy body behind a crumbling stone wall. And then, ignoring the whistling bullets that whizzed past her ears, she crawled through the muddy ground, clawing at the earth to retrieve the leather bag before it sank completely into the puddle. There was no magic or superhuman bullet-dodging skills, only the mud, blood, and the will of a woman determined not to let anyone steal the fruits of her labor. Orrin Pike groaned in pain. He thrust the heavy revolver into Sarah's hand, showing her the last shortcut through the narrowest crevice in the rock. "Go," the old man whispered, leaning against the rock face, drawing his remaining pistol. "I will guard this door." Sarah had to go on alone. No one to shield her, no one to protect her. From this moment on, she carried the entire weight of justice on her small shoulders. But when she hid behind the last rock, she opened the leather bag to check its contents. Her heart stopped beating. The most important page, the original survey map, was soaked with fresh blood, and its torn corner had taken with it the coordinates of the southern boundary marker. At Silverwash, Dalton Vane was playing his last card. He was forcing the sheriff to handcuff Matt Hale for stealing documents from the silver mine. Matt was exhausted. His wounds were gaping open, blood soaking his shirt. He could barely stand, leaning heavily on his horse, Shadow, which was snarling and blocking anyone's way. But Dalton Vane miscalculated. He hadn't expected Matt to spare Bryce Rusk's life.
Before dozens of onlookers, the foreman, Bryce, clutching his crushed hand, trembling, confessed that Vane had ordered the arson of the hay storage and the murder of Widow Reed.
The veil of fear was torn apart. When Vane, enraged, drew his gun, the sheriff hesitated to obey, and from the dark wooden steps, the people of Silverwash silently emerged, forming a human wall to shield the truth.
At the same time, 50 miles away, the oak doors of Parowan County Courthouse burst open.
Sarah Reed entered. Her dress was covered in red mud. Her hands were stained with blood, her hair matted by the wind and rain. But her eyes shone like a torch in the frozen desert.
Dalton Vane's fraudulent land reclamation application had been submitted earlier.
The bribed registrar smirked, about to dismiss her file because the survey map was torn, missing the coordinates proving the claim. But Sarah didn't give up. She slammed the tax receipts down on the table. With an extraordinary memory honed through thousands of days and nights working on the land, she confidently compared each boundary marker. The southern marker is right next to the juniper tree that was struck by lightning. The 1879 tax receipt clearly shows the natural boundary before that damn silver mine was built. And my husband's signature on the transfer document is a cut and paste from an old contract, forged after he passed away. An elderly deputy land inspector, standing silently in the corner, had heard it all. He stepped forward, pushed the corrupt employee aside, took the blood-stained receipt, and affixed a bright red suspension stamp to the silver mine's file. The verdict rang out sharply. Suspend Silver Vane's mining rights pending federal review. Matt won by keeping a living witness. Sarah won with her memory, her tenacity, and the unspeakable papers. Night fell as Sarah returned to Silverwash with the suspension notice. But when she reached the main street, she didn't see the sullen man waiting. Only Shadow lay prostrate on the ground, guarding the steps of the doctor's office. Darkness enveloped Silverwash, but the chill of fear had vanished. Sarah dismounted in front of the town doctor's office. Shadow lay prostrate on the hard ground at the doorway, its sturdy neck stained with dried blood from Matt's hands. He lifted his head to look at her, a proud and weary gaze of a warhorse that had completed its mission, resolutely refusing to let anyone pull him away from the closed door. Inside the room reeking of alcohol and iodine, the old doctor shook his head wearily. He's still breathing, but too weak. He stood in front of Dalton Vane's gun for too long, draining him to the last drop of blood. Sarah didn't cry out. Women on the frontier didn't waste tears on self-pity. She quietly placed the mining suspension order, stamped with a red seal, on the wooden chair, then slowly sat down beside the edge of the bed. Matt's breathing was ragged. He slowly opened his heavy eyelids. The sullen man's gaze swept across the white paper under the oil lamp, then settled on the widow's face, smeared with mud and road dust. "The farm still stands," Sarah whispered softly, her voice calm but unwavering. Matt's lips curved into a strained smile. So this time, I didn't stay silent. There were no tight embraces or a boisterous wedding in the sequel. Love in the Wild West never needed empty vows. It was proven by the most costly choices. Sarah didn't turn back, despite her desire to save him, because she respected the ideals he was risking his life for. And Matt didn't run away, even though he could have lived, giving her enough time to reclaim justice.
They kept their promises to each other through action. A man redeemed his honor, and a woman single-handedly preserved her home.
The dawn broke brilliantly over Silverwash Cut Canyon. The silver ore wagons were gone. Sarah stepped out the wooden gate of Reed Wash Ranch, where just 2 days earlier, a death sentence had been handed down. With strong, bare hands, she pulled Dalton Vane's stake, inscribed with a bright red V, out of the ground. She didn't throw it into the fire. Sarah propped the rotting stake against the stable wall, like a monument, bearing the eternal reminder of the frontier. There are things that will never be taken away in a single day, if this land still has people brave enough to hold fast to the truth. The story of Silver Wash Valley has ended, but the trails of the Wild West continue to stretch on. Thank you for stopping to listen to today's story of courage, honor, and redemption. If you'd like to join me in continuing to light campfires and explore more survival stories on the frontier, please leave a mark by clicking the subscribe button. See you on the next leg of the journey.